Reading speed. How fast do you read? I'm thinking about this topic because this morning Michael K. Vaughan published a video to YouTube titled Reading Speed. And he talked about how he's always been a more or less slow reader, but he's only recently developed the need or the motivation to read faster since he became a booktuber. And so I wanted to make a response video about it. And this is not a debate. There's no argument. I don't disagree with anything that Michael K. Vaughan said. In fact, I encourage you to watch his video. I'm going to leave a link to it down in the description below. But I am going to give you some concrete tips and some of my own thoughts about reading speed and how to read faster. I'm Randy Ray. This is The Literate Texan. This is my channel on YouTube where we talk about books, highbrow, lowbrow, literature, anywhere in between. We're not particular snobs here. And this, unlike most of my videos, which are about specific books, this is actually more about the mechanics of reading and how to read faster. I want to start by talking about my reading speed, okay? I had a little bit of a reputation for being a fast reader when I was growing up. And I guess I probably was a fairly fast reader. But as an adult, I've not been a particularly fast reader. And that's probably obvious from the number of books that I've read in previous years. I've kept a log, of how many books I've read per year since 2011. So for the last 15 years or so, I have actual data about how many books that I've read. And it's a little bit all over the place. We're looking at let's see here. I'm just looking at random numbers here. In 2017, I read 7 books all year. Not particularly impressive for someone who's a booktuber, right? With an English degree, mind you. That's what I majored in, okay? In 2018, I read 5 books all year long. 2019, I read 17 books all year long. And there were some good years in there too. Like in 2013, I read 63 books. Things didn't really start picking up for me until I got on YouTube and became a creator and started a channel talking about books. And when I was younger, much younger, like when I was a teenager and even in my college years, I read lots of books. I read all the time. You couldn't find me without a book in my hands. And I'm more like that now than I was before. Part of that's because I recently learned that I have cancer. And, I wanted to decide, how do I want to spend what time I have left on earth? And I started thinking about what I like to do as a young person when I was really young. And one of the answers was I like to read. Heck, I majored in English literature. I used to own a bookstore. Should be obvious that one of my favorite activities in the world is reading. I don't know why I let it slip by. But I can get more books read if I read faster. I'm reading against the clock, see? And you can see the difference because when I got the diagnosis and when I launched my YouTube channel, the numbers shot way up, We're looking at between 5 and 60 books per year, every year for the last 15 years until 2023, which is the year I read 70 books. That was a record breaker for me since I started keeping a log. And then last year, 2024, I read 121 books. This year, I've read 80 books so far. So, yeah, clearly I'm spending more time reading, but I'm also reading faster. You can't get those numbers up without reading faster. And, but, here's the trick. I don't want to decrease my amount of joy from reading faster, okay? So, what else have I got to talk about here? I've got notes. I laid this out because I wanted to make a really good video since this is a response video to Michael's, and I love Michael's videos. So, first thing I've got here, why speed matters. Why your reading speed matters, okay? Well, for some people, it doesn't matter at all. If you're a casual reader who just reads solely for pleasure, the important thing is how much do you enjoy it? And, reading fast, reading slow, doesn't matter. As long as you're really getting joy out of the process, then you're doing just fine. So yeah, for a lot of people, reading speed doesn't matter at all. It starts to matter in certain situations, and I've written these down, okay? Your reading speed starts to matter when you become a content creator, okay? I started a channel on YouTube about books. I'm a booktuber, and a lot of my friends these days are booktubers, okay? Reading speed matters because now I have to schedule things. I've got certain things that I do, like I try to post at least 1 or 2 lists every week of books, and it's nice to have read some of them before I start talking about them. And I post weekly updates on what I've been reading all week. You know, I don't want those videos to be 2 minutes long since I've not read much that week. You know, I want there to be something to them. So I have to do a lot of reading so that there's something to them. And then there's specific projects like, you know, I'm hosting a book club. We're reading Dracula for the book club, but I also have certain projects of my own. For example, I'm reading the complete works of H. Rider Haggard, and I'm just devoting an hour a day to it every day. And I figured that I can finish all of H. Rider Haggard's books in the next 2 years. I've got a great video on my channel about H. Rider Haggard too. It's real easy to find. If you go to YouTube search box, type in H. Rider Haggard and Randy Ray, it'll come right up for you, okay? So, and one of the events that Michael mentioned in his video was the Read What You Own challenge. If you own a lot of books, like if you're buying a lot of books, but you haven't read most of them, or they're taking up a lot of space on your shelves, you should probably read a good percentage of them before you start buying more books. So the Read What You Own challenge, you set a number, 25 books, 50 books. I think in Michael's case, it was 500 books, but that's the number of books that you already own that you're going to read before you allow yourself to buy a new one. I never participated in this one because, you know what, that kind of restriction to my buying books is just, it's the kind of thing that my brain is just going to rebel over, okay? So, yeah, that performance matters. Performance measured is performance improved. Best manager I ever had told me that performance measured is performance improved. So we're going to talk about how to measure your performance in terms of reading speed and how to improve that next. That's what the next topic is. So if you want to increase your reading speed, the first thing you got to do is start measuring your performance, because if you don't know, you don't know, okay? You might think you're reading faster, but you might not be. Performance measured is performance improved. You don't have to do anything but start keeping a log and measuring your reading speed, and your reading speed will improve automatically because of that. You don't have to do anything else, just because the act of measuring will help you improve, okay? But I'm going to suggest that you actually get real strict about this and start with a baseline, okay? And this isn't going to be hard for you to do, okay? You're going to get your phone, okay? And it's got a timer on it. You're going to set it for 30 minutes. You're going to get a book. You're going to hit the 30-minute timer. You're going to write down the page that you're on at the beginning. You're going to read for 30 minutes. You're going to write down the page you're on when you ended. Subtracting one from the other, you'll know how many pages you've read in 30 minutes. Double that, and you know how many pages you're reading per hour. That's a powerful piece of information to have. Knowing how many pages you read per hour is very, very, very powerful, because from there, you can actually start setting some goals and working on improving your reading speed, okay? And yeah, we're going to talk about specific reading speeds in just a moment, but I'm going to start dropping some hints on how to improve it already. Once you've got your baseline, okay, then you can start to look at ways of improving your reading speed, okay? And these are going to be real simple. A lot of it has to do with your environment, okay? You need a good reading environment if you're going to read faster, okay? So the first thing you're going to want to do if you want to get more read is you need to eliminate distractions. In my case, that means I've got to turn off the TV. I've got to turn off the radio. I've got to turn off the ringer on my phone. Any of those distractions, I've got to let my roommates know that when my door is closed to my reading room, don't bother me. Yeah, I have a specific room in my house just for reading. I call it the library. Here at Driftwood Ranch, the library's not very big. There's one armchair and an ottoman in there, and that's it. And it's my cozy space. It's where I go to read. But it's distraction free. And it's where I've created an environment where I can read and increase my speed of reading because of the environment. Yeah, no distractions is the first thing. Also, you got to have sufficient lighting, okay? If you're trying to read in a dark room, you're going to go slower just because you're going to have a hard time reading. Unless you've got a backlit iPad or maybe the Kindle Fire product or something like that, which, you know, those are backlit. In those cases, you don't necessarily need to worry about lighting because you've got your own light source on your device that you're reading from. But if you're like me, you probably like to read actual paper books from time to time. And if you're going to read paper books, you need good lighting. You need sufficient lighting. You need plenty of it. Okay. Also, you need to be comfortable. Okay. If you're not comfortable, you know, you're just going to be distracted. There's just no getting around it, So, it's okay to have a comfortable chair. And, we're going to talk about getting into a state of flow later in the video. You can't get into a state of flow if you're physically uncomfortable, because you're going to be thinking, oh, golly, you want to forget that you're sitting in your reading chair because it's so comfortable that you've just forgotten all about it. And then I've got font size and medium is next on my list. Okay. So I do most of my reading now on my Kindle. And I'll tell you why. And this is also a tip that I haven't mentioned. Man, go get your eyes checked. Okay. If your prescription on your glasses is off, it's going to slow your reading down. And my prescription is way off right now. It's due to a couple of things. Some of my medications have affected my vision. So I've got to go to the doctor. But anyway, yeah, get your eyes checked. Make sure your glasses are up to date. I read mostly off the Kindle now because I need to get my eyes checked, because I literally cannot read anything on paper anymore. These notes that I'm reading from here are written in real big black letters using a Sharpie just so that I can read them. But so I read on a Kindle, and I've turned up the font size very, very high. It's not quite at the maximum, but it's way over there to the right. There's a little size bar that you use. The other thing, though, is, you can experiment with which font you're using on your Kindle device or whatever device you're reading on, okay? Some people read faster using a serif font, and some people read faster using a sans serif font. I'm not going to get into too much detail about which is which. You can look that up on your computer if you're interested in the difference between the fonts. But my suggestion is, okay, use the same book and track your speed using each of the different fonts for 30 minutes each, and see which ones you get the fastest pages per hour out of. You might be surprised at what a difference just a simple change in the fonts can make to your reading speed. I didn't even think about this until someone commented about it on my blog the other day, or on one of my videos the other day, because they were big fans of a particular sans serif font, but their eyes aren't my eyes. So it might not be a faster experience for me than it is for them. The point is, experiment and see what works for you, okay? Okay, so the next tip is such a big tip that it doesn't even belong in the list of tips. It's getting into a flow state, okay? This is where it's at when it comes to reading. Finding your groove and getting into your groove, that's where you're going to see the biggest gains in reading speed right away, okay? Is getting into what's called a flow state. It's an optimal mental state that you get into where you're just reading and you're just totally immersed in what you're reading. It takes most people 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes to get into this flow state. So, momentum and mechanics, okay? All my previous tips before now had to do with mechanics. What font, what device, what lighting, what glasses you're wearing, that sort of thing. Now we're talking about momentum. You get momentum going when you're reading and it's just become effortless for you. All right. So, and that's what you want to do. You want to get into a flow state. And since it takes most people 10 or 15 minutes to get into a flow state, this means it's probably a good idea to have longish reading sessions. And I know there's a popular time management technique called the Pomodoro technique, where you do something for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break. And then you do something for 25 minutes and you take a 5-minute break. And then you do something and you take a 5-minute break. I'm going to suggest that when it comes to reading, you want to get into that flow state, and 25 minutes isn't long enough. Yeah, you'll get into a flow state, but you'll only be in that flow state for the last 10 minutes of each Pomodoro. The guys who are big fans of the Pomodoro technique call it Pomodoros. So I'm going to suggest that if you are a fan of the Pomodoro technique, that instead of using 25-minute blocks of time, at least use an hour block of time, okay? Use 50 minutes and take a 10-minute break every hour. Or maybe do 80 minutes and then take a 10-minute break. That'll be an hour and a half when it's all said and done. But you want to get into that flow state and stay in that flow state as much as possible while remaining physically comfortable and taking care of things like getting a drink of water when you need to, or going to the restroom and relieving yourself or whatever. That's the most important thing to me about getting in the flow state. What else do I have written down here? Getting into the groove. Consistency. Okay, your brain loves consistency. And so if you read every day at the same time, in the same place, your brain is going to know, okay, it's 4 p.m. and we're sitting in my reading chair. It's time for me to go into read books mode. And your brain will get into that flow state faster because you've got a routine set up. And if you have any kind of rituals related to your reading routine, that's great too. It can be as simple as lighting a candle with a scent that you particularly like. It can be a specific kind of drink that you drink when you're reading. These things help contribute to getting you into a flow state faster, which is also going to increase your reading speed. Okay? So, that's what I've got for you in terms of tips for reading faster, except for the next tip, which is really, really big. It's huge. And what could be a bigger tip than all these mechanical tips and getting into a flow state, okay? Goal setting goals. Now, I do not like self-help literature. I've been to see the self-help authors, the speakers and stuff. It's just not for me anymore, okay? I guess I've outgrown it. I've walked on burning coals at the Tony Robbins seminar, though. Let me just put it that way. I've done it in the past. And you know, they talk about the power of goal setting as if there's a kind of magic to it. And I guess that there really is. So, yeah, performance measured is performance improved. But at some point, you want to start logging your improvements and start getting serious about how many pages per hour you're reading. If you're serious about becoming a fast reader. And again, you want to do this without losing any joy. And you also don't want to lose any comprehension. You know, there's no point in reading 300 pages per hour if you don't know what it is that you're reading, okay? So first of all, we're going to talk about some averages here. I've got some averages written down in terms of pages. You've going to get your baseline, just like I explained earlier in the video. So your average casual reader reads 30 to 50 pages per minute if they're reading fiction. Not per minute, per hour. Golly whiz. How did I mess that up? They're reading between 30 pages per hour and 50 pages per hour if they're reading fiction. And we're assuming they're reading modern fiction there. If you're reading classic fiction, like say you're reading Dickens or something like that, or if you're reading nonfiction, you're going to read considerably slower than that. You're probably looking at between 20 and 40 minutes, 20 to 40 pages per hour, okay? That's a casual reader. Now, an experienced reader, this is going to be like your average booktuber or your average person who reads every single day, okay? Your experienced reader is going to have better numbers than that. Fiction, modern fiction, they're going to read between 60 and 80 pages per hour. And then with nonfiction or classic fiction, you're looking at 40 to 80 pages per hour, okay? A fast reader, okay, someone who's really fast. Not necessarily Steve Donahue fast, but fast. If you know Steve Donahue, you know what I mean. But a fast reader might be reading between 90 and 120 pages per minute, okay? So, or per hour, excuse me. I keep saying per minute, but you know what I mean. 90 and 120 pages per hour. At 120 pages per hour, that's 2 pages per minute. That's fast, okay? And in nonfiction, you're looking at between 60 and 90 pages per hour. Now, if you're skimming, okay, and I don't recommend skimming, but skimming has its uses. For example, if you're cramming for a test or something, or if you just want to get a general idea of something, you can skim a work. And if you're skimming fiction, you're looking at between 150 pages and 300 pages per hour. Nonfiction, you're looking at between 100 and 250 pages per hour if you're just skimming. And you can forget about any kind of detailed comprehension when you're going at that rate of speed. And it's probably not very enjoyable either. I don't know anybody who says, hey, I'm going to go skim this book to relax tonight. You know, I'm going to curl up with a book. It's more likely what you're going to do. But once you've got your baseline, okay, it's time to start setting some goals. And you want to set achievable, smallish goals, okay? And this doesn't even matter unless you're keeping a log. You have to start keeping a log of your reading. If you're really serious about speeding up your reading, you'll start keeping a log. And you'll keep a log for each session. And I've been doing this for about a month now. But you should be able to increase your reading speed. Let's say you're at a casual pace right now. You think you're slow because you're a booktuber like me, and you're slower than the average booktuber. So I'm reading, let's say I read about 50 pages per hour right now. If I can get that up to 55 pages per hour or even 60 pages per hour, then that's an achievement that I can feel really good about. And Michael pointed out in his video that once you've sped up, once you've gotten faster, that speed will eventually become the new normal. It just takes effort. You just have to push yourself to read a little faster, okay? And I'm always of a mind that I can do anything I put my mind to if I put my mind to it and really try hard for 30 minutes or less. So that's, you see people talking about reading sprints online. They're usually talking about focusing and everybody participating together. I don't know if they're talking about reading fast or not, but they want to eliminate distractions. But when I'm talking about reading sprints, I mean you're reading as fast as you can to try to get that number up. And eventually that muscle will get exercised and you'll go from 40 pages per hour to 45 pages per hour or 50 pages per hour. You should be able to increase your reading speed over the course of a month comfortably by 5 to 10 pages per hour per month until you eventually max out at some level that you're not comfortable at anymore, where you start to not enjoy it anymore. If you get to a point where you're not enjoying your reading anymore, then you need to slow back down. If you get to a point where you're losing comprehension and you're having to go back and reread stuff or you don't remember what you read, then it's time to slow down again, okay? But yeah, goal setting is really important and keeping a log is really important because you don't know how you're doing with your goals unless you're keeping records, okay? Yeah, I mean, how would you if you're not keeping records? That's one of the things I learned when I was a poker player, in fact, was that if you're a serious poker player, you got to keep records of your wins and your losses. Otherwise, you're not serious. And anybody who tells you that they're a break-even poker player, they're lying. They're a losing poker player. Winning poker players have no problem telling you I'm a winning poker player and I win about this much per hour on average. So that's it. That's my response video to the great Michael K. Vaughan's video about reading speeds. Like I said, not a debate, not an argument, no controversy here. I just had some stuff that I wanted to throw in on the subject in terms of some concrete advice that's actually real similar to the advice that he had. So here's what I'm going to ask you for, though, okay? Yeah, my relationship with Michael K. Vaughan is really good, by the way, even though he was teasing me about my thumbnail pictures not too long ago. But I'm not going to get into that right now. All right, so here's my request of you, or one of my 3 requests of you, all right? The first request is, hey, leave me a comment. Let me know how fast you read already, if you know. If you're someone who doesn't care about increasing your reading speed, I can't imagine why you would have watched this whole video. But if you do want to increase your reading speed, have you tried anything from this video? Any of these tips ring a bell? Are you going to try any of these things? How fast do you read now? How fast do you want to read in the future? What made you want to speed up? Just talk to me in the comments about reading speed. I'm interested. I read every comment and I respond to almost every comment. If I don't respond, it's just because I forgot. That's my first request. My other 2 requests are pretty simple, okay? Stay sexy, folks. That's request number 2. And number 3, stay hydrated. It's so important. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.